All right. Welcome back, everyone, to our second day of reviewing your builds live here on the SaberSim YouTube channel. My name's Jordan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim. This is a new form of content that we're experimenting with here this week. We kicked it off yesterday for the first time. It seems like it was really helpful for people. We had a lot of excitement around this. A lot of people submitting their usernames here to be reviewed on stream. The goal of this, what we're trying to do, is help make some of our content a little more practical for you, for your process, pulling up actual builds, actual portfolios that you entered, giving me an opportunity here to take a look, review it, provide some of my thoughts here on what we're looking for. So in terms of what I'm looking for, there's a few things that if you watched yesterday, you'll kind of have gotten the pattern a little bit. But the first thing I'm looking for, I guess overall, speaking kind of broadly first, is limiting mistakes, right? I think that was a theme that was coming up over and over yesterday, of trying to find maybe situations where there are just like literal process mistakes made in the build, maybe a custom metric or a lineup rule or something like that that's having an unintended consequence, maybe just programmed incorrectly into the builder, but also some more broad mistakes or making the game a little bit too hard for yourself. We talked a lot about contest selection, both in the form of getting as many shots on goal as possible, but also finding the easiest competition by playing the lower stakes first. We talked a lot about diversification, making those shots on goal that you are getting by playing all of these different entries as diverse as possible, so that you have, when you're playing 150 lineups, when you're playing 50 lineups, if you're down to just playing 20 lineups, those lineups are all different enough from each other that you're coming at those from a different angle. And then the one other thing that I am consistently looking for here as we've been doing these is staying on top of the news, kind of paying attention to the overall flow of the slate. We talked a lot about the July 23rd slate yesterday, which obviously had the weather concerns, but we were looking for things like late swap, things like that here. So I think overall, if I could kind of sum it up, it's making this not too hard on yourself. Is kind of making sure you're doing the handful of right things that we're defining here as a good process, a winning process, avoiding any mistakes and just staying on top of things here. So we'll go ahead and dive in. I have, I think, 6 or 7 usernames in my queue here for today. So we'll get through everyone. If there are questions as we're talking through this, feel free to post them into the live chat and we will get started here. Let me go ahead and get our first one plugged in. We are picking off where we left off yesterday because there were a few folks that had submitted yesterday and we didn't have time for them. So Bill's Nut 66 here, I think, is first. And we have those pulled up. We're going to pull up the 23rd slate for this one, because that was the one that was originally in question here. So again, we'll start with contest selection, looking at the portfolio here. So just 2 contests here, the solo shot and the quarter jukebox. This is fine. Nothing wrong with this. You're playing, again, getting those entries in under the $3 range. You're going to have softer competition here. I would probably mix in some of those single entries, those 3 entry maxes that are under the $3 range or $3 and under here. I mentioned yesterday that no, getting an extra $6, $7 down into those contests is not the skeleton key. It's not going to immediately just change your DFS process, but those are really some of the easiest contests in the entire lobby. So I think it's worth mixing them in there. In theory, if you're sticking very tightly to bankroll management principles, you'd probably be better served playing like some of those contests, the $1 single entry, the $1 3 max, things like that before you jump into the solo shot. Some of the ROIs that you will see in contest flashback for those contests here. So if we look at, I'll just kind of show you what I mean here. The Daily Dollar, for example, some of the possible ROIs in this contest are as high as they can get in the lobby. 186.5% ROI here from this user. These are not achievable ROIs in any other contest. And again, I think this is a $250 to first contest. So not talking about life-changing money here, but you ought to play these contests because they're the most profitable things you can play. And you should be taking advantage of them while you have the availability to do so. So that is the one thing I would say on the contest portfolio side for this user here. We'll take a look at the actual solo shot here and look at the sim ROIs. So once again, another player that has a very high ROI in this contest. So this is the first thing that I always check in my lineups overall here. 70% ROI, looking at like probably top 15 in the contest. I assume that this player faded that Braves game that went on to be postponed. As we were looking yesterday, that was kind of a recurring theme here. I think Henry in our Discord channel pointed that out to me, that a lot of your ROI on this particular slate was tied to basically fading the game that ended up going on to be postponed, and all of the dead lineups that played that game boosted everybody's ROI up. But this is still something you love to see. It's good to know that you are on the right track with this here by seeing that positive sim ROI. One thing I mentioned here yesterday as well is it looks like this was actually a break-even slate for this particular player, 20 in, 20 out. The sim median profit and the sim 99th percentile profit columns can also be very useful to look at here when you are reviewing your own portfolios as a way to set reasonable expectations of what the ranges of outcomes look like here. So this was very nearly this particular player's median outcome, the 50th percentile outcome. And I think a lot of times when you are losing money on slates, it can be hard to know if you are playing well. The combination of the sim ROI column telling you that you are long-term profitable, the 99th percentile profit column telling you what it looks like when you have those kind of 1 out of 100 type profit days, and then the sim median profit setting reasonable expectations of what you should expect to happen most slates you play, I think is like the three-headed monster there of using flashback to get a good sense of what's going on there. So let's jump into the build and see if anything jumps out to me here on how this this user put together lineups here. Okay, so in the build, let's see, anything done with min or max exposures looks like a pretty standard process here with some nice diversification using min uniques. We're seeing some aggregate metrics here, which this is a really nice tool if you're not aware of this, especially if you're running multiple contest sims, if you are messing around with exposures or min uniques or things like that, just as a way to visualize how different lineups in your set grayed out. So it looks like what this user put together here is the minimum ROI from the contest sims for the 40 lineups shown here, the average and the median. And then as you make changes to the min uniques or make changes to exposures, you can see the impact of what you're doing on these ROI measurements here. So can be a really helpful tool to just get a quick glance of how the impact of your changes is changing your contest sim metrics. I think this is useful already if you're just diversifying with min uniques, but if you are the type of player to take some stands, to make some adjustments with min and max exposure, seeing this in real time, I think is a really helpful way to go about this. So we're also sorted by actual score at the moment. I'm sure this was for review. The top overall actual scoring lineup in the lineup set, the pool after having been filtered was 182.6. I am curious again what the winner was in this contest here. Looks like 190.8. 192 would have probably put you in looks like around a top 9 spot. That's another useful review tool that you can use here, is looking at your entire pool, sorting by actual score after the slate, and see if you had any lineups that would have been competitive in the contest in your pool. And the point of that is another way of figuring out if you're on the right track. There's no way to just make the top actual scoring lineup appear in your entries file. But if you play enough slates, if you're playing enough entries in each slate that you are playing, over time, it's likely to be there, right? It's kind of a numbers game at that point. So it can just, again, go to show how valuable it is to stay in the game, both like mentally and also in playing in a way where your bankroll allows that. So in terms of kind of on the flip side of that, I mentioned at the start, maybe playing some of the entries that you played into the solo shot here into the lower stakes single entries, right? The reason for that is not only the ROI discrepancy of what the highest ROIs that are achievable in the single entry versus the 20 max, but if we also look at, again, the kind of the winner in that contest, the highest actual scoring lineup in the Daily Dollar for this slate was 174.3. So we go back to the build, you can kind of see the ROI laid out in front of you of why the ROIs are potentially so high in these contests when you look and see that what was required to take down that contest was so much lower here. So but Sean, yeah, I'm doing the 23rd for these users. I don't think this guy actually played the 24th slate, and he was signed up for yesterday's show, and I just missed it. So we're doing the 23rd here, but I'll do the 24th if that's the one you played. That's no problem. Either way is fine. And Aaron, yeah, please feel free to fire your name into the Discord. If you put it in the chat as well here, I'll take a note of it. I think it will probably end up being reviewed tomorrow, possibly today if we have time. But it will probably more than likely be on the list for tomorrow. But as of right now, you would be first on tomorrow's. So, and Don, what we're doing here today on this stream is reviewing slates from our subscribers from the past couple days of Baseball DFS. We do an open Q&A office hours stream every single weekday, Monday through Friday at 4 o'clock Eastern. That's led by Coach Andrew. We also do one on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'm going to stick to reviewing these builds here from our subscribers for this stream because that's what we're doing here. But I would highly recommend checking out Andrew's office hour show, asking him any questions you have about strategy there. So, and Timothy said took first in the solo shot early slate yesterday. Congratulations. That is awesome here. So back to this this user here. Everything looks really good to me. Looking at this here, I guess the one other thing I'll check is the contest sim settings. So looks like a lot of different contest sims were plugged in here. It looks like this user is borrowing my strategy of ownership of accounting for ownership variance with all of these different contest sims. The idea being you run the contest sim against all of the different fields we have, and you start to account for some subtle differences in ownership between the different fields. It makes your portfolio a little less fragile. Again, I think that's fine. I have felt that to be tedious at times. That can be a little time consuming. I certainly don't think that's a mistake. I was the one that recommended that here. I have come off of that a little bit, especially with our change to the ROIs recently in the contest sim that we updated. Your contest sims now are a little bit more, they're aware of how many lineups you are playing. They're a little bit more diversified. They're a little less fragile on their own. So certainly nothing wrong with that. But I've found that the ROIs coming directly out of the builder are just the stock contests that you're actually playing are quite a bit more accurate here. So otherwise looks good. Looks like a very strong portfolio. I would say if to a couple things to maybe take away from this is to consider playing those single entry and 3 max at the low stakes, just because those can be such profitable contests to play. You might as well take advantage of them while they're there for you. I also don't see a late swap here. Again, on this particular slate, it didn't matter a ton. I think most of the lineups were out at lock. The lineups that came out post lock didn't seem to change very much. It looks like a decision was made to fade the weather game at lock for this build, so we didn't even have to do anything for weather there. But having not late swapped at all does mean you maybe missed an opportunity to squeeze out a little bit of extra ROI on a per lineup basis by running a contest sim on your swap. So this is probably a good example of a slate where not late swapping certainly didn't kill you, but it might have been an opportunity to squeeze out a little more juice. I think on this slate in particular, right before these 3 night games, might have been a good opportunity to see if you could have done anything to, by the 740 games, is there anything you can do to squeeze out a little more juice out of the lineups that are already in play based on how the games are going, based on the live field lineups, that kind of thing. So, but otherwise a strong portfolio. So, okay. Let's bounce to the next one here. And I think this is Relic CK, I think. Give me a second to get this pulled up here. And yeah, see a few other usernames here in the chat. So feel free to continue firing them into that chat if you want me to review your builds, your portfolios. We are probably close to full for today, but you will be the top of the list for tomorrow's version of this show. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay, so we've got Relic CK pulled up here. I'm going to bounce into the main slate for yesterday because I am seeing builds there, and that one is a little bit more recent here. So let's take a look at the contest portfolio. Quite a bit going on here. Let me get my head on straight looking at this here. We'll sort by entries. Actually, let's sort by entry fee and look at it this way here. So a pretty big spectrum of contests here, but right away, the thing that I look for and that I like to see here is that taking advantage again of these low stakes contests. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. These are the contests with the softest competition. If you have access to these contests, they should be the foundation of your contest portfolio. So it looks like we are playing these. That's great. Already love to see that. That's awesome. Looks like this player is playing the dime times. We had somebody yesterday playing those contests as well. I think that's totally fine. A good way to get additional action down at these stakes. Keep in mind that I think at the point at which I think really in particular when you're playing these dime times, I would consider filling them with a lineup that also makes it into another contest in your portfolio. That is not something that is more of a mental thing for me. It would bother me to see that I had the nuts in a dime time and won $30 and it didn't appear anywhere else in my portfolio. When I play these, I tend to think about them more as doubling down slightly on a handful of lineups rather than truly being lineups I want to put unique lineups into. It's not a must do. You certainly don't have to. You can play unique lineups into them. It really doesn't matter from a long-term standpoint. But that's a little mental trick that I've picked up after having won the dime times, sometimes with the nuts lineup, and knowing that it could have been anywhere else, and it would have made it would have been a much different day in my overall bankroll there. So otherwise, let's see. I mean, it looks pretty good at a portfolio level here. One thing that does jump out to me, clearly playing with a little bit of a larger bankroll overall here. So I love to see that we're also playing the night slates, some of these showdowns, the early slates, turbos, even mixing in some other sports here. It looks like one of the things I've mentioned in our contest selection stuff before is if you have a bankroll such that you are jumping above $3 on the main slate to get enough action down, you should also be playing some of those night slates, the turbos, the showdowns, things like that. And you should be playing those before you're actually jumping above the $3 range. So it looks like this user is doing exactly that. The main point of that is rather than getting additional action down on the main slate and jumping into the hardest contests in the lobby in the form of the ones that are above that $3 range, you are spreading out the additional action there into less correlated slates, and slates that are less correlated to the main slate, giving you more of giving you less correlation to all of your action on that day's games. Kind of very similar to taking unique shots on goal within a given slate by diversifying your entries. This diversifies your overall bankroll investment to baseball on this day. And if let's say you were really wrong on the Orioles and Marlins game on the main slate and it totally sunk all of your main slate entries. Well, your night slate's live, your Giants Dodgers showdown's live. That action that would have just gotten reinvested into the main slate otherwise is now diversified by playing these different entries here. So we'll take a look at, let's look at a couple things here. Because I think a portfolio like this does give us some room to look at some interesting things. So I'm going to start by pulling up the solo shot here and looking at sim ROI. And actually, you know what? I want to compare two different contests that have kind of a similar structure at different stakes, but it might be a little bit tricky because I don't think that mini max processed well. Let's look at the daily dollar first. Okay, so again, overall, it looks like the portfolio for this user is very likely to be profitable here. So 55% ROI we see in the solo shot looks good. Again, onto the right track there. Let's take a look though at comparing that to maybe the $25 skipper here. And we see, again, those ROIs drop, right? So you're still playing profitable here. That's a good thing. But this is the point I just really want to hammer home in a way you can visually see this, the difference in stakes here. You've got, and these are different lineups. So it's apples to oranges a little bit here. But the drop in both what the attainable ROI was by any given player at the top and also this user's ROI, you can visually see that difference in stakes. So that's kind of why I mentioned playing those different slates, getting into the night slate, the showdown, the turbos, instead of playing above the $3 entry fee on the main slate first, is the right way to go. So anyway, just wanted to show that. But yeah, I mean, looks like based on contest flashback, we are seeing a pretty strong portfolio here. I wanted to take a look at this mega mini max, this $3 150 max. That contest is a lot of fun. I've played it quite a bit this season. It is a tough contest. So we see one of our lower sim ROIs here, 3.92%. Still a overall profitable portfolio. This is a tough contest. It's almost like a mini flagship in the way that I kind of think about it. A little bit of a softer payout structure, only 10% to first. But this is a contest that the Sharks have access to, and you will see. I think this is a tough one to play. It's probably one of the last contests I would mix in before you actually just start entering the flagship straight up. You see, we're playing 50 entries into the flagship here, so it's fine to have maxed that as well. But this is one that I think is a little bit of a tougher gauntlet overall in a contest portfolio. So be aware if you're playing that $3 150 max, you will see often that the top player in this contest, their ROIs often are quite a bit lower, especially when you're looking at 150 maxers. The top overall 150 maxer was Mr. Shady Advice, whose portfolio we reviewed yesterday on this stream, 7% ROI for 150 lineups. Just very hard to play 150 lineups into this contest and be profitable. I think it's just affordable enough that you have a ton of different players that can max this contest nightly. It has a nice big prize to first that looks very attractive. 2 players, so people enter it, and then you also have all of the top pros getting into this. This is a tough one. That $3 150 max can be tough. But overall, I mean, the portfolio looks good. Love seeing the extra slates in here. So everything looks good there. A lot of different builds here jumping out to me. I assume, I'm not sure. We'll take a look at some of these builds. My hunch is that these are intended to go into different contests, but perhaps not. So it looks like we'll try to piece together what we're looking at here. So it looks like build 1 here, we had min-max exposures set. This looks like a build that was intended to be used kind of as a field, using using SaberSim ownership, but rebuilding the field. I'm curious if anything else was changed here. Maybe some lineup rules or any stack exposures or things like that. Pool exposure. So yeah, looks kind of like a stock build here, but built around the ownerships. Let's see if we can keep digging and see what else we're seeing here. But that looks like a build that is meant to mimic the field. So similar situation here. I wonder if we can find where we actually filled our lineups, and if our contest sims will tell us what's going on there. Definitely some creative stuff with the... Okay, so I think I kind of see what's going on. So it seems like, to me, what this user is doing is coming at the ownership variance problem of contest sims in a slightly different way, by basically using SaberSim to build 4 or 5 totally new fields, and then running contest sims against those as well. So rather than using the default field lineups that we have, we are creating our own fields using exposures matched up to ownership, to then kind of become fields. I like the idea of creative solutions to solving the problem of ownership variance. I think that is a little bit of a hole in the way that contest sims are set up right now, is that we simulate these things with the full range of outcomes of the games, but then have a very narrow range of outcomes of what we think is going to happen in the contest in terms of the field. And I think looking for creative solutions to account for that is a good idea. This does seem pretty tedious, like maybe even more so than using the default SaberSim fields. And the way that you are actually putting these together by taking the ownership projections um, and setting them as min and max exposures is like a lot to create all these different fields. I think that would be pretty time consuming. On the other hand, you are kind of manufacturing a much larger field by creating all of these different contest sims. Um, I I don't hate this as an idea here. If you have the time to do it. I think it's time consuming, and I don't know if it's that much better than running multiple contest sims against the different Saber Sim field lineups that we've already put together, especially knowing that you're basically using the ownership projections that are generated by building fields already as your baseline. You're almost basically saying take the Saber Sim flagship GPP set of field lineups and rebuild it and kind of just reshuffle it a little bit. And I'm going to simulate against the original and the second one. It seems a little time consuming to me. I don't think I doubt that this is having a negative impact on your ROI whatsoever. But I don't know if it is adding additional ROI above and beyond a less time consuming way of accounting for ownership variance in your portfolio here. So I mean, but clearly doing something right here with the way that the ROIs work. So I think playing pretty well. I think maybe your time investment is a little high for what you are getting out of this, though. But that is kind of your decision if that's worth it there. We do see the late swaps take place here throughout the slate, which is great. It looks like 4 different late swaps were run here, so accounting for news in that way. Our contest sims in the late swap build are, I was going to check, are using the live field lineup, so we're getting off of the extra contest sims as we're doing late swaps throughout the slate, which is great. Looks like we're well diversified with min uniques. Looks pretty good. Yeah, main takeaway here again is I don't have the data to make a strong call on if what you are doing with these extra field lineups that you're kind of manufacturing in your SaberSim app here are adding a ton of value. My hunch is based on the way you are doing this, taking the ownership projections, which is a product of the original fields, feeding them back into the builder as min and max exposures, and then rebuilding lineups, is that it is spinning wheels a little bit. I don't know how much value it is creating, but if it's working and you're happy to spend the time doing it, I don't think it's necessarily a leak. And otherwise, the portfolio looks pretty good. I did notice I wanted to take a look at one more thing before we moved on here. I assume that build 11 was used to actually fill the lineups originally here, but I only see a pool of 500 lineups in that build. So I don't know exactly what might have happened there or why there are only 500 lineups showing up here. But there are only 500 showing up, and I don't know why. So I maybe a 0 was accidentally removed from the build settings and just 500 lineups were built and then missed it, or just needed to get lineups in quickly. But if you're building on Ultimate, especially doing all of this other stuff, you should at least be getting a 5,000 lineup pool and working from that in your build. The other thing too is it doesn't seem like there's any filtering that was done with all of these extra contest sims. So I think more than likely a different build here earlier in the chain was the one that was actually used to fill these entries. And I just can't find it on a quick glance here. So yeah, but I would say at least just make sure you're using that 5,000 lineup pool for whatever is going to fill your entries. But yeah, I don't see the build that was actually ultimately used to most likely fill everything, at least on a quick glance. So, but I'm going to keep us moving along here and get to our next name here. And we'll keep it going. All right. This is for Bama in Discord. I think it was like Bama 2442 or something to that effect, but Bama something. So let's go ahead and get this one pulled up. Okay. All right. Let's take a look. It looks like the 24th main slate was played here. So we'll pull this back up. Take another look. All right. So just the dime time here in this portfolio. And it looks like a handful of entries played into the wiffle ball as well here. So pretty small portfolio here. Again, I would say I guess to be completely blunt here at this, if you are just kind of testing the waters out just to see like how the lineups are looking, I think this is totally fine. It, you are going to need to put more action down into DFS to actually like have a sustained sense of profit. Really in any form here, like even it is hard enough to win a 3,567 person contest where that win is just $30 in first place. It like it's just not going to add up to very much here. So I assume that what this is more about like really just kind of testing how things are working, to make sure you've got the process down to see how things are looking. But like I think you would probably at least kind of like the bare minimum portfolio that I think you'd want to put forward into a contest following the profit plan would probably be the quarter jukebox, which is the quarter 20 max, the $1 single entry, the $1 3 max. That's that's $8. And those contests, I think, are at least going to give you a little bit more action of something that you can start to build from there. The dime time in particular, just playing like any given dime time, is actually deceptively hard. This is a deceptively hard contest to be successful in because the number of effective entrants of people that are playing this contest is low. So if you took the contest size 3567, divided it by the max number of max entries, that's not actually a lot of unique users. And because the prize pools are so small in this contest, who you are competing against in this contest is almost zero casuals. It is all sharp players that still have access to the under $3 range that are just playing every single one of these that fill, or every single one of these that get opened up. So I actually think stress testing a process is better done against the quarter jukebox because it is a larger contest. That sounds a little counterintuitive, but because it is larger, there's room for more worse players to take up spots in that contest. So nothing wrong with playing the wiffle ball over on FanDuel, but I would actually, if you are kind of just testing the waters out here, play the quarter jukebox and then throw a lineup into the daily dollar and the $1 3 max as well. That is a better allocation of your time and money as you are getting your feet under you here. I am curious like what the sim ROI actually ends up looking like in this contest here. But yeah, you can actually see it, right? Like we were just looking a minute ago here. The 18% maximum sim ROI here for a contest that is under the $3 range and is a 20 max. This is like a third of what you can get in the solo shot or the quarter jukebox in terms of attainable sim ROI. And it's because there just aren't a lot of bad players that play this contest. It's a little bit counterintuitive. You wouldn't think that for a dime contest, but it is all sharp players that are just trying to maximize the amount of action they can get down. And they just play every single one of these that opens up. So, but let's take a look into the build and I'll see if anything's jumping out to me here. Okay. Let's see. Let's try build 2. Having a little bit of a trouble getting the lineups to pull up here. Okay. This, I think, is probably what was actually used to fill the entries. Let's see if I can see that here. Oh, no. So it was build 1 that was used to fill, but I'm having a little bit of trouble getting build 1 to load up. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So we have build 1 pulled up here. Let me take a look here. So it looks like a couple things. So in the contest sim, looks like the contest sim settings have been adjusted a little bit here. So this is a self sim. So we're simming the lineups against themselves, and we've also adjusted team totals here. So a couple process things, and again, there might be something going on behind the scenes, maybe kind of some intention of doing this that I'm not seeing here, but it looks like the team totals were adjusted and then a self sim was run here. So the team totals were adjusted by a lot. So Texas, for example, was bumped from 5.1 to 6.3 runs. And then in the contest sim setting here was set to simulate these lineups against themselves. And the problem I have with that here, of doing it that way, is the whole point of running a self sim, which I've talked about in some other pro videos and things like that. I think it's fine to do that, but that you are resting on this idea. It is very important that your build, your pool that you have built, is representative of what the field might play. And if Texas's team total has been bumped from 5.1 runs to 6.3 and lineups were built on the back of that, you're no longer doing that, right? Your field is no longer representative of what the field might play. So I think what is kind of happening here is maybe just some confusion about some process stuff. And I think the best thing that you could do is simplify your process quite a bit. It seems like a lot was done here. A lot of knobs were turned that really just, to be completely honest, don't need to be. So rather than going in here and trying to rebuild these fields or take stands with your field lineups here, I think it's totally fine to make adjustments to team totals if you want to take stands. I think that's perfectly fine, especially if you are backing that up by then diversifying your portfolio. But what I would do here is start your build. In your initial build, I would not actually make any changes to team totals here. And I would run and see what you are getting. Because if you are making changes to team totals here to take stands, to get more exposure to certain teams, and that is based on some kind of research that you've done for the slate, you should think about SaberSim as one of your pieces of research, because it's not just an optimizer in the sense you're not just getting the top projected plays, right? It's you're basically looking at a 5,000 slate sample of what could happen on the slate based on our simulations. That should be a factor in your research. So run that build as the starting point, right? That's the foundation, I think, from which your research should begin, and then you can add on whatever other components of that. In your contest sim settings, I would simplify this dramatically by just creating the actual contest sim for the slate, for the contest that you are playing here. I think as you get more intimately familiar with what the contest sims are doing, and then ways that you can potentially bridge gaps and in some of the things that they are not accounting for, you can start to layer those things in with self sims and building your own fields and things like that. But I think this kind of contest sim as it is set up here is a mistake, because frankly, I don't think it makes a lot of sense what is being done here. Like it's not a plausible, it's not a logical field that we're seeing here at using the field lineups. So I would create the contest sim using the default settings, run the contest sim. So I think I lost it. But once you've created the contest sim here, I don't know why it's not popping up here. Might be something of the way that I've kind of pulled up this build here. I don't know if it's letting me add another contest sim, but create the contest sim using the default settings, run it. And again, the other thing that jumped out to me in the filters here is that the contests that we're filtering by ROI to remove lineups where the ROI is 0, which is a good thing. That's something I do as well. You're removing any unprofitable lineups from your portfolio, assuming that the contest sim settings were set up correctly. This is good. Removing the negative ROI lineups from your pool. A greater than ROI standard deviation filter I think is going to have this is almost the wrong direction. So first, ROI standard deviation, what it actually is, it's the standard deviation of the ROI observed in the contest sim. So the larger this number is, the more high variance that lineup's profitability is relative to the sim ROI. So when you're looking at ROI standard deviation, the way you're really supposed to think about this is comparing two lineups with a similar ROI, you would want the one with the lower standard deviation. That's kind of the idea, is if the lineups are expected to make the same amount of money over the long term, take the one that has a lower variance route to getting there. So two notes on this. One, a filter on ROI standard deviation, if you were to use it, I think you would want it to be the other way around, because you don't want to intentionally pull in higher standard deviation lineups in terms of their ROI. You want, like, all other things being equal, you want lower ROI standard deviation, assuming the lineups themselves are profitable. But I wouldn't use this filter at all. What I would do is use the risk adjusted return on investment measurement, which takes into account risk the same way the ROI standard deviation kind of describes it, and is a more holistic way to rank your lineups. So it kind of captures what I think that filter was intended to do. So the filter, as it's set up here, I think is actually eliminating some of the better lineups from your portfolio. And there's just a better way to do this using the risk adjusted return on investment. So kind of to sum up for this user, kind of a homework for lack of a better word here of what I would do. I would change the contest selection framework a little bit here. Play the quarter jukebox, play the $1 single entry, play the $1 3 max. That's $8. Those are much more beatable contests where there's actually a little bit more juice in winning first place, and you're going to be up against much easier opponents. Even though it's a little bit counterintuitive there, you wouldn't think that the dime time would be such a tough contest. It is a tough contest. When it comes to your actual process, I would think about simplifying dramatically here. So I would run a build with default SaberSim settings. Instead of making adjustments to team totals for now to take stands, look at the team stacks that you get out of your original build. Actually, let me back that up because that's a little bit out of order. Instead of trying to adjust the contest sim settings, changing your field lineups, rebuilding your own fields, things like that, use the stock contest sim settings for now. They are very well built. They are not perfect. There are things in my process I do to bridge gaps that I see in the contest sims. But for now, at these stakes, focus on just running the contest sims as it is. Use risk adjusted return on investment as your primary sorting method when you have run the contest sim. It will, I think, do a little bit of a better job of what you're trying to do with the filters here. Diversify with min uniques. That is one thing I don't see in here at all. Get your lineups a little bit different. I would experiment with min uniques 3, 4, 5 just to see if you can spread out a little bit more. And then look at your leverage and look at your exposures here and apply any stands that have shown up in your research. So if you think Texas is incredibly undervalued on the slate and you want to make sure that's your biggest stack, make them your biggest stack, right? If you are getting, if your biggest stack is 50%, 55% San Diego, and you want that to be Texas, come in here and 50% Texas, right? And make the adjustment that way. And we will pull in profitable lineups from your pool that have Texas stacks in them. So I would kind of just think about simplifying this overall and make sure you've got the strong fundamentals, and then you can start to bridge the gaps with potentially making adjustments to team totals, changing some of the inputs to the sims, maybe getting a little more creative with the different types of contest sims you are running. But I think simplifying this for now will give you much more immediate, better results on your builds for now. So, all right. Okay, let's pull up our next one here. Who do we got? Okay. I think this is Mathis in Discord. Mayhem Mathis. So we'll get this one pulled up here. We did have a question here. So Raf had said, if you adjust run totals for just one game on a slate this size, would you say that the self sim is also ineffective? I think it kind of depends on what your adjustment to those team totals are. right? Like to me, looking back at this particular build, I'll pull this up since we still have this. Like these team totals have clearly been adjusted to be exploitative, right? To be a strong stand. If you're adjusting, like the Saber Sim team totals are not literally exactly what Vegas has. We have some stands baked into those ourselves. But if we had projected Texas at 5.1 runs, for example, maybe Vegas has 5.3. So you change this to 5.3 and then run a build and call that your new field. That's fine. Like you're kind of just making a subtle shift. These team totals, in my mind, based on just what I'm seeing here, were clearly adjusted to take an intentional stand with a portfolio. So at that point, your pool of lineups you have built is not representative of what the field might play. It's representative of what you might play, but it doesn't make sense to use it as a field lineup anymore. So I would say less than half a run per team at most. Like if you adjusted every team to be exactly what Vegas has, and then you run a build and treat that as a new field, I think that's like fine. The one thing to keep in mind is our fields in SaberSim are already built using an industry aggregated projection. So it kind of already captures what I think you might be trying to get there. But it's certainly a plausible field. And I wouldn't call it a leak or a mistake to have done that. So when we're thinking about the hierarchy here for a lot of these, there's kind of like leaks and mistakes. Like this is having a negative impact on your build, right? This is not something you should be doing. And then there's like maybe neutral things that the leak is really just the time taken to do the thing. Adjusting all of the team totals in the app to match Vegas, then running a build and treating that as your field, it seems like it might be a little bit more of that second one of like you could. It probably isn't bad. I don't know if it helps, but all right, Mr. Mathis is here. Let's go ahead and pull up those lineups and take a look. Okay. Give me just a sec to get these pulled up here. Got to do a little bit of a dance to get the builds pulled up here. Okay. And it said play DK on the 23rd. All right. All right, let's take a look at that portfolio here first. Looks pretty good. Couple shots taken here overall. So a couple things right off the bat. It's totally fine to throw a gamble in at the flagship every so often, right? At the end of the day, it should still be fun. If part of what is fun about DFS to you is having a shot on goal at a 50K win every night, that's totally fine. I'm not going to fault anybody for that. I do that all the time. It's fun to have that little bit of the sweat. One thing on that is I would kind of treat that the way you actually think about that as like an entertainment expense. It's like when you're playing it in this way, an $18 lottery ticket at 50K, that if you're following the fundamentals of building strong lineups in SaberSim, at the very least, you got your money in good on that. But I would kind of try to separate those two things in your mind here of like that's entertainment expense. That's mostly fun for the sweat. And then you're building and playing with strong foundations in your other entries that you're playing here. I would also try to be playing some of the other strong contests that are under this $3 range. The daily dollar, again, the $1 3 max, the quarter jukebox, I think should appear in this portfolio. There's no reason that it really shouldn't. If the $18 and the $3 entry that are being played as lottery tickets here on a night-to-night basis are preventing you from doing that, that's when I would get rid of them and play them. If you are serious about growing your bankroll, you should be playing all of the soft contests that are available to you at the low stakes, rather than taking these kind of Hail Mary shots at the flagship GBP. So some contest selection things that I think could use a little work here. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a little bit of gamble into your portfolio, but you should treat that as kind of separate, and it shouldn't be prohibitive into you getting into the best contests in the lobby, which are all of those sub $3 contests here. So like if we look at them here, right? The $3, I think even the $3 3 max, the $3 single entry. This is I want less than or equal to. Oh, why didn't that work? Oh, whoops, less than or equal to. There you go. And maybe say above what, 300, greater than or equal to. So there's a lot here. There's a lot to play, right? I mean, another way of even looking at this, again, thinking of $18 as just a one shot at the flagship, it is fine if it is just entertainment expense. But that is 36 entries you could play into the mini max. One of the themes that we've talked about here the past couple of days is we've been pulling up different users' portfolios, looking at their builds, had a very high scoring lineup in their pool, a lineup that could potentially win one of the contests that they played. You are trying to perfectly hit the nuts on that 1 out of 5,000 shot if that lineup's in your portfolio into this $18 flagship entry. If you that is instead 36 entries into the 50-cent mini max, well, now you've got 36 times more shots for the same amount of money on pulling that lineup out of your pool and putting it into a contest. And then you take this thing down once, now all of a sudden you're playing with a different bankroll, right? You add $2,000 to your bankroll, all of a sudden it gives you the opportunity now to reinvest that quicker and build up from there. And then by the time you're getting to the flagship GPP, you're able to play 10, 15, 20 entries into it in a way that is sustainable. So I would rewatch or watch the DFS profit plan video on the YouTube channel and really try to internalize some of those concepts. If one of the things that I don't like about that video as it is recorded right now, and that will change in the future, is again, it is fine to do these things. It is fine to take shots. I don't want to be the fun police and say, no, never play the flagship, never take a shot. Like it's perfectly fine. It should not come at the expense of getting the opportunity to play the other great contests that are in the lobby that you have access to. And this portfolio, it looks like it did to me. But let's take a look at the ROI here for at least the solo shot. See what we're seeing a little bit here. Yeah, so a negative ROI here on this particular slate here, grading out as negative. So we'll take a look at the build and see if anything jumps out process-wise as to maybe why that happened. I want to kind of get an idea of what the possible sim ROIs look like here. But a negative ROI here. This can also just happen from time to time. I think I'm at like a 80% hit rate of having positive sim ROIs on the season here. So sometimes you just will have a negative ROI based on the way that the field played. Maybe they played in a way that the contest sims or that you didn't expect. This can happen. This isn't necessarily a cause for alarm, but we'll take a look. Let's jump over to that build that looks like was used to fill this here and see maybe why that was. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the build here. Okay, so the contest sim settings look pretty good. Let's see if anything else was adjusted or tweaked or anything like that here. Exposure. Oh, okay. So it looks like we played the Braves game. So this was the game that got rained out. So it was pretty much a immediate lock to have a negative portfolio if you played this Braves game with the weather. Like even just enough players popping into your lineups where like 25% sale. We have, let's see, Braves, and it was Cincinnati, right? So I think that is very likely the cause of this. Even just a handful of lineups that are basically dead can really sink your ROI. I don't think it was necessarily wrong to have played the Braves at lock. I am far more conservative. Oh, I just realized my camera died. I wonder how long you guys have not seen the camera here. Let me see. I wonder why that happened. Not super important to see me here, but I've just been talking with the black screen here for whoever knows how long. There we go. Okay. Hopefully it stays up. Might have overheated or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's not necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily wrong to have played any Braves, especially at lock. I think if I remember correctly, the game delayed. The lock of the game happened like you kind of had to make a call when the game got delayed and decide what you were going to do. And if you decided to keep it in your portfolio here, you were taking on some risk there. This is kind of a visualization of what the risk was, right? The risk on this slate was the game postpones and you are just dead. Like your lineups, your portfolio is mostly sunk at that point. I guess you're still live in a handful of the lineups that don't have the Braves in them, but your portfolio is not going to look good. I would have been more conservative with this game, and I think it looks like, I mean, in the on the way to diversifying your portfolio here. Oh, actually, okay, it was 100% Chris Sale. So yeah, there you go. So that kind of sinks it here. So I think there should have been something that was done to at least quantify some of the risk that you were taking on with this game. I think the most conservative way of handling that. Oh, was the swap done? Yeah, so even in the swap, we're still seeing Chris Sale here. So the most conservative way of accounting for that weather would have been a full fade of the game. That would have been my approach. I have an entire video on the YouTube channel talking about weather risk and postponements and why I choose to be, I would say, almost hyper conservative with the way I handle weather. I think if you had not done that, there's another way of kind of quantifying some of that risk might have been a reduction to Chris Sale's projection, reducing him down to try to account for some of the risk that you're taking on by playing him in this weather spot. Maybe a capped maximum exposure so that your entire portfolio is not sunk if that game postpones. But I think there should be some kind of thinking about the weather concern there and some risk mitigation in a given build for a slate like this where there was a game with a legitimate chance of being postponed. I basically, to just give you the Spark Notes version of my weather video, I fade any game that's like yellow orange, orange yellow, or orange on Kevin Roth's dashboard almost instantly. Sometimes I will play a yellow orange game if it is a game that there are players that I really want exposure to and it seems like the game has a decent chance to play, but I will always mitigate risk in those spots with maximum exposures and by making adjustments to those player projections to try to quantify the risk of that player in my pool. So I will reduce to be less wordy. I will reduce the player projections for the players playing in those weather games because I think you do take on a lot of risk playing those, and it's not something captured in the Sims. So anytime there is something that we know matters and is not captured in the simulations, there are no Sims where the game rains out. It should be something that there should be a paper trail in the build of how you kind of quantified that. So otherwise, I don't want to harp too much on the weather because it is kind of just an instant killer of your lineups for this particular slate. The build otherwise looks very good. It looks like kind of default settings here, no other big stands. I love how diversified you were able to get with your min uniques. One note that I would consider doing here, I mean, it looks like, yeah, this is a very well diversified portfolio. The contest sim looks correct. You are sorting by the correct metric. Everything looks good. You could toss in a filter here to filter out the lineups that aren't profitable, but it's not crucial. It's just like a way of backstopping those min uniques to make sure that you don't accidentally go too far with them. But like otherwise, your process looks very good. So I think in terms of things to shore up here, I would the contest selection is by far the big one. I also like that there's a late swap. I forgot to mention that. Even if you end up missing out on the Braves thing, you have a portfolio with 100% Chris Sale. What this late swap would have allowed you to do is to get as much out of your lineups as you can. So I do notice there was no contest sim run on this late swap. So that is kind of maybe the one missing link that should have happened here is a contest sim gets run. And then you sort by risk adjusted return on investment here. And what that would have done is it would have taken into account the live fields you're competing against, the live sims that are of the games that are in progress as the games are going on. And when you sort by risk adjusted ROI, what you would have been able to do is basically say, hey, I know I got stuck with 100% Chris Sale. What can I do to try to salvage any of the ROI in these lineups possible? And it may have been very little, but it might have been able to win you a couple min cashes. It's worth it to do so. The late swap's great. I'm glad to see a late swap here. It looks like maybe just the contest sim was missed. So Again, in terms of takeaways, I would make sure you're playing some of the best contests that are out there in the form of these low stakes, quarter jukebox, daily dollar, the $3 stuff, all of those contests. Taking shots on the flagship is fine. Don't let it come at the expense of playing the good contests. So if it is, remove these for now. Maybe your shot is on this $3 150 max instead of the $18, and the $18 is going into softer contests under $3. Be mindful of weather. I don't want to say that I am strictly right about how conservative I am with weather in MLB DFS, but you should be thinking about it. There should be something. I think if you end up getting burned on a weather spot, I don't think you should kind of throw up your hands and be like, there was nothing I could have done, because there's risk there. You could have mitigated some amount of risk there, whether it's fading the game, reducing a player's projection, or capping with max exposures. And then make sure to run the contest sims in the lead swap. That looks like that maybe just got forgotten. But otherwise, like it looks good. It looks like your process is sound. So, okay, let's keep it going. Here is Mr. Sean. Get this one pulled up. We have 2 more for today. We're already at the hour mark. This flies by every time. Every time I hop on a stream and start talking to all you guys, it just goes so fast. But we're gonna get through both of these too. Sean's here. Sean, I'll be nice, I promise. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Main slate from yesterday. Get it pulled up. All right. Right off the bat, not ideal. 150 into, I think I said it about 20 minutes ago, maybe the hardest contest in the lobby. The $3 150 max. Yeah, I think you can do a lot better than this. We'll look at it here again as well, right? Especially at 150 lineups. I mean, this is a brutal contest to play. It is very, very hard to play 150 into this contest and be profitable. I mean, the nice thing, it's also hard to get crushed in this if you're playing with a sound process. Like the fact that you're negative 3% ROI in this contest, to me, is indicative of the fact that you're probably actually playing pretty well, because the rake is whatever 16% in this contest. You're playing against a bunch of pretty sharp players, all packing 150 lineups into this thing, finishing with a minus 3% ROI. Like, that just kind of is what it is. It goes to show how tough this contest is. I think for $450, the amount of softer contests you could get into if your goal was bankroll growth there's way more. You obviously got all the under $3 stuff, but if you're ready to make the jump above the $3 range, which you might be if you're playing $450 a night, and you're thinking you're probably only going to get maybe $50, $100 down under probably about 100 with the actual regular mini max. So you get $100 down on the main slate. I would like to see some of the other slates played before dumping into this contest. You could play the Knights, Turbos, Showdowns, things like that. Decorrelate some of that additional action down into other slates. So, yeah, obviously, right out of the gate, I actually do think for this contest, as weird as it sounds, this is actually a pretty good ROI. You can actually see it. You're like top 25 by 150 maxers here. Probably if we look at overall players, I assume that this is actually among unique users. Say you're like so you're right here. This little, I don't know if you guys can see this, but do you see where this little bar is? So this is sorted top to bottom. So you're like, this is another way of visualizing how hard this contest is. This is unique users, not just maxers, right? Sorted by sim ROI in descending order. We are in like the top 10%. So top 10% DFS player in the $3 150 max on a night. Congratulations, that's minus 3% ROI. Thank you for paying the DFS tax there. So can do a lot better with the contest selection here. If what you are after is a realistic sweat at a 6K win and trying to and basically gambling and trying to get your money down decently well, I mean, you're basically playing a a gamble with a 3% hold on it and giving yourself to 150 shots at $6,000. Like, I think it is important to quantify that with like DFS goals. I'm going to do this stream and review these builds as if everyone's goal is bankroll growth and strong foundational play. And that isn't necessarily the case for everybody, but that's where I'm coming from. So if that is your goal here, can do better on the contest selection side. Let's jump into the build. See what we see. I assume this was the actual build that was used to fill at lock. It looks like another build. Oh, it's an empty build. Okay. Yep. So this is probably the starting point here. Let's see. See if anything is funny here. An ownership cap. Okay, let me just look around to see if anything else. Got a custom metric called Holy Grail. Okay, this is a bit of a fun one here. Stacks adjusted here. I think that's fine. I'm kind of just trying to get my bearings here quickly before I go through this here. And then filtering out the negative ROI lineups. Okay, so stacks, I think is fine. I do something similar. It makes a lot of times you end up getting these types of stacks out of your build anyway, but this means you're not wasting spots in your pool with lineups that you were never going to play. So I think that's totally fine. I do want to see. So I don't love the ownership caps. Not my thing. Resort because it's showing. Okay. Let's see. That should be better. I don't love ownership caps. I think this is just a relic of like optimizer land. I don't think you get much out of this here. It's very possible that whatever heuristic you're using to get to 120 here is like directionally accurate enough that it doesn't really have much of a negative impact. I would be stunned if an ownership cap meaningfully improved the ROI of anyone's lineups in a contest sim. I don't even know if this is actually honestly very limiting. I'm trying to like come up with a reason maybe you might want to do this. If I don't know, if maybe if you ran builds and kind of noticed anecdotally over time that your contest sims tended to particularly prefer lineups where the ownership was under 120%, and by setting this rule you end up with a pool of 5,000 lineups that is far more likely to be something that the contest sim would think would be high ROI, that's fine. Maybe that works. But the reason I don't like these kinds of rules is they lack a ton of context. They don't account for the context of the slate. They don't account for the size of the slate. They don't account for the particular dynamics of that slate. They're very blunt tools. So Sean says I used a default build to come up with that number, wasn't random. Yeah, and again, I think like that there is a process of finding a heuristic to set one of these rules that I think would make sense to me. I have experimented in a similar way of setting min projection floors where I would run a build, find the lowest projected lineup that was positive sim ROI out of my contest sim, set that as a minimum projection, and set that as a minimum projection, and then run another build so that all of my lineups in the pool are now above that projection and resim out the pool, with the idea of the contest sim said that the kind of the positive ROI min projection floor for this slate is X. So I'm going to only build lineups that are X or greater and then get a more productive pool. If you're doing something to that extent, like if you are accounting for slate context in this rule in some form or the other here, I think these are fine. I don't know how necessary they are, and they make me nervous because it is very easy to make mistakes with aggregate rules. So I will trust that your process of getting here was sound. Um, I would just be careful, I guess is a way to put it. And I think maybe a better way to put this is it would be one of the first things I would say you should remove from your process if you adjusted your contest selection and played better contests and were finding that your sim ROIs were coming in low. That's what I would do. Like if you have a process for having developed this and you think it makes sense to do this and it is contextualized for the slate, I think that's a big point. It is fine, but review your results in contest flashback, and if it looks like you are coming in negative ROI more often than you would expect, this would be one of the first things I would remove. So um, let's see. I'm going to expose the holy grail here because I want to see what we're doing here. Okay. So we are taking risk adjusted ROI normalized here, weighting it positively weighing ownership, and then negatively weighing standard deviation here. So yeah, I mean, I think this is actually like fine as a custom metric the way it is designed. Um, Kind of, it's almost like extra risk adjusted return on investment. Um, the one thing I wanted to check here is that you were normalizing everything the same way here, and you are. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people using custom metrics all the time is scaling things incorrectly where they're mixing up ranks and values. And I don't fault anyone for that because these are frankly kind of confusing to know what's going on. The easiest way I think to do this correctly is make sure all of these are the same, and it is. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with this. I think you're getting a you're kind of it's almost like trying to make return on or risk adjusted return on investment even less fragile, like double counting standard deviation in some ways and then also preferring lineups that are a little bit higher owned from your pool, all things considered. This does play a little bit weird with the ownership cap. I guess maybe that's why the ownership cap is there, is to reduce um reduce the ownership of your pool and then kind of re-encourage lineups back in. I would not be surprised though if this has the impact of playing you extremely close to that 120% ROI cap. And it looks like it kind of does. Like all of your lineups, this is one of the things that I don't like about some of those caps is just by definition, what they tend to do is play a ton of lineups, especially when combined with your custom metric here. You're going to play a ton of lineups right around your cap every night. You're going to play a ton of lineups that have about exactly 120% ownership, which like is maybe fine. I mean, there are lineups that are probably still going to grade out as profitable. You're just kind of like arbitrarily selecting lineups around that ownership cap because of the way that you've put your build together, and may just be somewhat randomly overfit to an ownership number that doesn't actually correlate at all to your lineup's profitability. Um, this process basically kind of seems like a roundabout way of basically overfitting to coming in somewhere between 115 to 121%, 120% cumulative ownership, in a way that I don't think is totally necessary. I don't mind the spirit of the the custom metric here. I know Matt has kind of played around with some similar things here, especially with using ownership as a positive weighting factor. But I just think in the way that the pool is put together, it may be overfitting there a little bit, or I don't even know if that's the right word, but that's the vibe I'm kind of getting here. Well diversified with min uniques. It doesn't look like any other like stands particularly taken. And again, showing up as like a top 10% overall player in the contest that you've entered here, like beating the rakes significantly in a very hard contest. So honestly, if you just played a bunch of softer contests and took the process as you have it, step for step here, and just loaded it into easier contests, you'd probably grade out as quite profitable in all of the low stakes stuff. Um, so I would just I would just keep an eye out of the potential effects of both the custom metric and the aggregate rule there. It's hard. I don't have all of the context of what you might have been thinking about there, but I would just be a little cautious. But I don't think those are like glaring mistakes. The metric is put together correctly for what it is trying to do. So let's see. I think I did end up sorting by risk adjusted return on investment on the build and might have changed it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it is adding that much above and beyond what risk adjusted return on investment does already. Especially the ownership component of it. I Yeah, I don't know. I would just be curious to play with this a little bit and see. I also think that what you are doing here may have been more valuable or more of a value add prior to the last ROI change we just made to the contest sims. Um, I think the contest sims now are going to naturally be a little less fragile just by using risk adjusted return on investment and then min uniques to diversify. So I could see this having been more useful before the most recent change and less useful now. But yeah. Anyway, Sean is a big go big or go home kind of guy from what I've learned. I mean, maybe this is actually like still a pretty well diversified portfolio. 6 min uniques, like there's not a enormous stand taken on any given team here. And all of the adjustments here, apart from the ownership aggregate rule, are made to actually make to almost play safer, to use ownership as a positive sorting method to basically take less low owned stands and to use standard deviation of ROI as a negative sorting method to play less high variance lineups. Those are like almost more like lower variance takes there. So okay. Let's go and knock out our last one here for today. And this is from let's see. This is from Red Yoda. Okay. Get this pulled up here. And change the slate. Okay. So I think based on Discord, Red Yoda said that they in the July 23rd slate played Chris Sale, and we've talked a little bit about weather already today. So I'm going to look at the 24th slate. Hopefully that's okay. I think it might be a little bit more interesting because we didn't really have any like slate impacting weather on this slate. So okay, pull up the contest portfolio. Kind of a broken record here. I think this is mostly good. You might as well be playing the single entry and 3 max that are under or at $3 because it's free ROI. Pretty simple. We've pulled it up a couple times here already. Like the highest ROIs that you can get in baseball DFS are in those low stakes single entry and 3 max contests. You ought to be playing them. Not the skeleton key. It's not the thing that you've been missing that suddenly completely changes your DFS experience, but it's free ROI. You should play it. So especially if you're getting entries into this $3 150 max, I would make that a part of your portfolio. This is also worth noting a contest that the best players in the lobby do have access to here, right? That you can see them. They pop up quite obviously when you look at this in contest flashback. I would actually prefer to see a couple other things before $120 put into this contest. First, some of the single entry stuff above $3 is just going to be a little bit more beatable. The $5 chin musics, the $12 base hits, even some of those single entries there are just going to they're more beatable contests. They're probably a better use of that money. I also would consider, if you're getting $200 or so down on a given slate, consider branching out to some of that on the night slate. Some of maybe the marquee showdown, the night slate showdown, maybe some of the turbos if there's decent prize pools for that. You're just, rather than getting, you could be playing this like basically exactly $100 here at the low stakes. Mix in the low stakes single entry, and then take that extra $120 you're dumping into this tough contest, spread that out, decorrelate it, put it into the night slates, put it into the night slate showdowns, that kind of thing. Think you'll have a little bit of a better, lower variance, higher ROI results there. So if you haven't gotten it already, I think that I don't love this contest. I think anybody that's playing this contest without essentially being playing most of the lobby outside of it, I think could have done better with where that money was allocated. And I have played this contest. Like, do not get me wrong, I have entered this contest. I have played this contest, and it is through studying Contest Flashback and just seeing how bad it can get there, where I'm like, I don't know, maybe I can do better than that. So let's look though at the ROI here, see what we see. Solid ROI in the solo shot, probably one of the better 20 maxers here. Yeah. So pretty decent ROI. Looks good at first glance. This mega mini max is, or actually, let's look at the mega mini max now. Let's do greater than or equal to 40. So again, and actually a pretty good ROI relative to the rake and relative to what this contest looks like, basically breaking even on your entries here. So, and actually, as it turns out, had almost nearly the exact same actual ROI. So playing very well, entering very, very good lineups into this contest, punished by the fact that the contest is very hard to beat and there are so few bad lineups. But the contest flashback, I would say, is indicative of you are probably playing well and could just serve to put those entries somewhere else. Looks like we're using the favorites here, 40 lineups. I assume 40 lineups were hand selected to be entered into that $3 contest. That is my hunch. But let's look at the builds here. Let's see what was used to fill these. Okay. So hard to tell exactly what was done here. I'm going to try to piece it back together. It looks like, let's see. So we've got some rules here. So we are, I don't know. Let's see. I'm just trying to kind of figure out what's going on here. So a lot of lineup rules and a lot of stacking rules. It looks like, okay. So it looks like the pitching rule here is just intended to curate essentially your pitching pool. So you're just throwing the pitchers that you're willing to use on the slate into this rule, saying at least 2. And then it seems like by putting together a combination of stacking rules plus this group that says use at least one of these players, you are kind of hand selecting your stacks and your one-offs. That is a very high degree of control that you are having on your builds here. I think if you are doing that, I would feel a little bit more comfortable if you were doing that in single entries and 3 maxes. It is, again, hard for me to tell how builds were filled here into your pool. I think if you are strongly opinionated about what team to stack, I'm more comfortable when people are doing that in their single entry and 3 entry maxes, just because it's easier to find one profitable lineup that is very highly constrained than it is to find 20 or 150 profitable lineups that are very highly constrained. I would say that this build is very highly constrained. Um, the having your available one-off players limited to just a set of 4 different hitters, and kind of basically hand picking the stacks that are being used for individual builds, I think is a very high level of constraint on the builder. Um, the contest sims have a way of backing you up when you run the contest sim, because it will kind of, even if you have really overfit the build with a bunch of lineup rules, it will reach into your pool and pull out the most profitable versions of them. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in your contest flashback. You're playing good lineups because the contest sims have identified the strongest lineups in your pool and pulled them out. But let's look at the filters here. Um, so yeah, so we are filtering with a projection floor, and we are filtering with a ROI floor, and you can see how few lineups are left here, right? Like, I think that is indicative of how constrained this build is, that you've basically kind of forced fit SaberSim to build 5,000 lineups with a very limited set of ways that those lineups can be constructed, with a very rigid one-off rule, a very rigid selection of your pitchers, and a very rigid selection of your stacks, such that after the filters are set, there's only 144 lineups left. And again, it's hard for me to totally piece together where these lineups ended up going into individual contests, but I would prefer, if you are highly opinionated about what a handful of your lineups look like, I would be more intentional about handpicking your lineups for your single entry and 3 max, which I actually don't even think we're in the portfolio at all here, and being a little more flexible with what's going into the 20 max and 150 max contests. And if you want to be overweight on certain teams as a part of your portfolio in the 20 and 150 max, handle that more with the min and max exposures, but give the sims a little bit more room to breathe in your process. I will qualify all of that by saying, I think the way you have put all of this together, at least as it is bared out by contest flashback, kind of all happen is generally working. I would actually come back to this, similar to what we talked about with Sean's ownership rule here, and say, if you over time found that your flashback scores looked low, or you weren't getting the results that you were looking for, the first thing I would do is scale a lot of this off. I would scale a lot of this back and give the sims a little bit more room to be flexible in the way that your pool is constructed, and then you can come in and apply your stands in the form of ownership, or in the form of your min and max exposures, and make adjustments that way. But I think the risk that you take on here is building a mostly unprofitable pool, and it looks like that's kind of what you ended up with. And we're able to just bring out enough good lineups that it graded out well. I will qualify this as well by saying, I don't know exactly how all of these builds were used to ultimately fill the lineups. It looks like at some point a new entries file was just re-uploaded to SaberSim, which is why the source here is uploaded. So I can't easily tell how things were filled. My hunch is that the favorites is a hand-picked, selected bunch of lineups from all of these builds that were used for the Minimax. I don't know how the other contests were filled, so it's a little bit hard to retrace it. These like individual builds, KC, Texas, Baltimore, it seems like are like maybe potentially test builds, or something to that effect. Or maybe like, yeah, it seems like almost what you're kind of have done here is like very quickly hand building lineups on SaberSim. Like, I know I want a stack with well, I don't know. I know I want exactly these. I know I exactly want 5 Kansas City players. My one-offs must be one of these 4 players. You must use 2 of these 6 pitchers. It's kind of like I figured out 80% of a hand build and then just like sim in the rest. And I think I think that's probably just limiting on the types of lineup constructions that you might be able to play that are more profitable, that you're not thinking about. So I am actually surprised, honestly, to see. I personally find the contest portfolio and the process that I'm seeing in the build here a bit at odds with each other. I'm surprised to see so many 20 and 150 max contests with such opinionated builds. I think in general, I find that people that play fewer lineups and play more single entry and three max tend to be more strongly opinionated about what types of lineups go in there, and vice versa. So this is kind of an interesting combination. I think to sum all of this up, I would say a few things. One, get into the single entry and three maxes that are available to you because they are very profitable contests. Spread out some before you jump above the $3 range, like before you jump above this to this contest or above it. I would consider spreading out into different slates. And it is fine to be opinionated about what contests end up in your single entry and three max lineups. It's fine to be opinionated about what all of your lineups are, but I would reduce some of the constraints that you have on your builds, especially in the builds designed to be entered into your 20 and 150 maxes. If you want to be more hands-on for the single entry and three max, that's fine. Make your stands, apply your stands in the form of min and max exposures instead of in the form of constraining lineup rules for the 20 and 150 max. This build, to me, to be quite honest, seems like it's kind of being saved by the bell by contest sims reaching in and pulling out those profitable lineups from a pool that was made to be hand built. And I don't know if it needs to look. I don't know if it needs to be that hard. Honestly, that'd probably be the simplest way I could put it. So, Shane, I do not have time for a night slate build on today's show. We are about at our time here. We've been going for about an hour and a half here. Got through all 6 in our queue today. I know there are a few of you that asked to be on the list for tomorrow, so I will make sure that you end up there. We have, a couple people that asked for tomorrow in here. So we'll pick this up again tomorrow, probably around the same time, 5:00 Eastern. No real main slate today, just the 2-game night slate. So if you are playing that, good luck. And I will see you all again tomorrow at 5:00. See ya.